We gotta go to the bullpen. Welcome to the Highland Bullpen, the all-new podcast bringing America's pastime to Scotland's shores. It doesn't matter if you're a Hall of Famer heading for Cooperstown or you're fresh out of the minor leagues, this is the podcast for you.
Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Highland Bullpen. And welcome, there's the two Daves, young Dave and grey-bearded Dave, tonight on the bullpen. We're going to chat through. We're going to revisit a topic that we touched on last season. We're all numbers guys, we're all stats guys, and we spent a wee bit of time last year looking at our favourite score lines, and Yorkshire Dave has identified something quite interesting about his favourite scoreline and his favourite team, the Boston Red Sox. So, Dave, do you want to maybe give us a wee heads up on what's been happening over at Fenway and when the Red Sox have been on the road?
Yeah, this dates back to last year as our Series 2, Episode 17 to be exact, last May. And we decided to come up with our favourite score and scenario, and I picked 6-5, come back from behind win. And no sooner do you say something out loud that sometimes you feel as though, will I live to regret that? And I've always got my eye out for this 6-5 scoreline. And in the very first game of the season, on the opening day, to our historic rivals, New York Yankees, in the Bronx, the first game of the season, we lost 6-5. I'm thinking, yeah, this is not a very good omen for the season. Later that month, we lost 6-5 on the road to Blue Jays in Toronto. So I'm getting a bit concerned about that. But then they had 3 wins in fairly quick succession in May against Richards' Mariners. Don't need to say the score, do I? 6-5. And
6-5 to the Red Sox.
Yeah, at the Angels and then Cardinals at Fenway. So that was well into June. Then away again in Toronto on Tuesday, the 28th of June. They lost 6-5 again to Toronto Blue Jays. So I'm getting a bit of a complex by now. And the very next day, however, the Red Sox bounced back and won 6-5. At this stage, I'm going to say that this is not a common scoreline. And Dave, last season, dug out some extremely good stats on someone who's looked at 20 years worth of MLB games and came up with a 1-run differential is the most common, but 6-5. I think he looked at 20 years of stats between 2009 and 2018, and less than 3% of games finished with a scoreline 6-5. So at this stage, we're already up to 7, and that's 2 in successive nights. The next day was a rest day as they travelled to Chicago to play the Cubs, and lo and behold, if they didn't lose that, 6-5. So my excitement of the previous night was then I thought, well, that's it. And we hadn't had a podcast for a while, so I thought I'm not really going to mention it. And then in the last series, 4-game series, Yankees at Fenway, Thursday, 7th of July, the Yankees beat us 6-5. So I thought, this is hopeless. However, on Saturday, the 9th of July, we had the full package come back from behind, extra inning, walk-off 6-5 win. Boston Red Sox 6, Yankees 5. So that's 10 games, believe it or not, out of the 80, 85 at that stage, have finished 6-5. Red Sox are 5-5 when the game finishes 6-5. And that's almost 12% of the games that are played. So bearing in mind that this study had looked at the score lines, and normally you would say that is a score line that might come up 3 times out of over 100.
Yeah.
So something's going on here, So if you say something out loud, sometimes it can really happen. So I'm quite amazed at that, and it's just it's an astonishing game anyway, isn't it, baseball? Especially if you follow it like we are doing pretty much every day. The most incredible things happen, and that's the story of the 6-5 score.
Probably never quite expected the astonishing thing to be that the Red Sox were listening to our podcast and trying their damnedest to satisfy you, though, Dave.
Yeah, well, perhaps they sort of send them a copy of our original broadcast, and
5 for 5, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere else, but there's so much to write about, so much other stuff that somebody somewhere will pick up on that, because they've been involved in a lot of close games all season, and in fact, they've been, as I've mentioned before when on air, been blowing a lot of saves, blowing a lot of games. But yeah, it is particularly pleasing, when you get that extra inning walk-off win, against a rival. And let me see if I can find this quote, because I think it was after last night. Last night it was beat the Yankees 11-6 to split the series. And Alex Cora said, I think, it's Ian Brown who writes the MLB rap for the Red Sox. And he said, when J.D. Martinez smashed an equalizing 2-run shot to right to tie it at 6 in the 5th, Fenway got about as loud as it gets in July. It's fun, said Cora. The last 2 nights it was loud. They were intense. When you go to the game at 1 o'clock for a 7 o'clock start, and there's a lot of people already outside the park, it means a lot. It's like, be ready. It should be a fun night. So it's it's happening, isn't it? It's great stuff. Great to see, great to hear, and it was loud.
Did you know the percentage of games that are 1-run wins, Dave? You said 3% for 6-5. Did you have a total for?
Well, I don't have the.
Nice.
I've got the link to the guy's report. But he did. There was quite a few, 3 or 4 graphs, and there's one about which was the most common scoreline.
Yeah.
But the other one was the run differential. So 1-run games is the most common winning margin.
Yeah.
Which is probably, probably
logically it'll happen because of walk-off.
Exactly. Yeah, I think he makes that point that quite a few games will finish on that basis. So I don't know exactly what it is, but that's 1-run games is the most common differential.
Young Dave, I think you selected the classic pitcher's duel of 1-0. You're not an Arsenal fan, but you picked that as your favourite scoreline. Any updates on the White Sox, or any changed thoughts on that from yourself as we go through 2022?
I definitely see more merit and something a bit more special which can arise from a 1-0 victory. The only thing I would say, it does take a little bit of excitement out of the game early on, perhaps those first 4, 5, 6 innings, before people can get into the thought process that they could be watching a perfect game or a no-hitter. So I think if you get hits but no scores, it's probably a dull game, if I'm being honest, going through a 1-0. But if you've got that anticipation of one pitcher or both, or these days, the kind of combined team no-hitter, I think that could be really quite interesting to be at a game like that and watch it. Every possible pitch is just going to be kind of box office, particularly as you get towards the back end of the game, Al.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, when it's something that happened last night. You almost feel at times, when's a good time for a pitcher to give up a run? Is it the old classic, football analogy, conceding the first minute and you've got 89 more in which to do so? So last night against Allen's Tigers, Michael Kopech with his first, he was up to pitch for the White Sox and he walked the Tigers leadoff man.
Yeah.
Number 2 in the order came up and smacked out a home run to give the Tigers a 2-0 victory with nobody out. And then Kopech went on to pitch 5.1 innings of no scores. And you think, psychologically, to come from that place where he's given up, the very first 2 hitters in the game, to then come through, what would that be, 16 hitters and not concede, psychologically, it must be pretty good. But also, you maybe get a team like the White Sox who are underperforming just now. The fans got on your back as well. Here we go, we're 2-0 down to the Tigers, nobody out against that. What we're going to do, we're going to burn through the bullpen now. Is Kopech replaced after another couple of hitters? So I just think everything to do with pitching is, the more I watch it, the more I become engrossed by the different pitches. And again, as being someone new to baseball, I would sit and watch and think, why are these guys not even getting in the zone at times? And you'll hear the commentators going, that's a great pitch. Okay, it might not have been a swing and a miss. It might count as a ball, but they'll say that was a perfect pitch. And it's something which looked 6 inches outside the zone. And as someone new to the game, I thought, well, that's just a waste of a pitch. But the more you see the psychology behind it, the relationship they build with the catcher, the knowledge they have to have on those hitters in the box, the more interested I am in pitching, which is probably a complete flip to my natural instinct would be watching guys hit home runs and seeing that type of box office entertainment. But I'm really drawn more towards pitching. So I think I'll stick with my 1-0 and a 10th inning or a bottom of the 9th walk-off, if that's allowed.
So a wee bit of pitching perfectionist there, pitching lesson. That's like what the Italians call a perfect game of football, nil catenaccio, something like that. Yeah. So I can see you there wearing the Azzurri blue and cheering on the pitchers as the game goes towards 2 teams, and that would be exciting. 2 teams going to a no-hitter or
plus, you're probably more likely to get home early, aren't you? You might, in a pitcher's duel, you might get out of the ballpark after 2.5 hours rather than, sort of being there till midnight or whatever. Yeah,
those priorities. So interesting. Red Sox Dave was talking about the Red Sox losing 6-5 on opening day to the Yankees. Well, I picked 5-4 as my score, and the Tigers obliged me on day 1 of the season with a 5-4 win over the White Sox. So well done there. They've subsequently had another 4 games, finished 5-4. All of them, they've got beaten. Once to the dreaded Yankees in the 10th innings. I think that still counts, as it is 5-4, so it'll still count. The Red Sox have beaten us 5-4 this year as well, Dave. And the Twins have done it twice. So, unfortunately, for my favourite scoreline, promising start to the season from the Tigers, but we're 4-1 down now. So hopefully we can record 4 5-4 wins before the end of the season and get that would be perfect if we won 5-4 in 5-4 games. Only that could satisfy my brain. So yeah, let's see how that goes. Slight aside, moving on to something else, but I've got my Durham Bulls T-shirt on tonight, and I went to see the Bulls earlier this season. Well, I didn't realise, but I guess neither of you know who Ripken is. Ripken. If you've heard of Ripken,
Carl Ripken.
Al, the Iron Man.
So no, Ripken is the bat dog at Bulls Stadium. So Ripken actually goes on to the field and retrieves the bats when somebody's going for running off there. So I think that must be a fairly unique thing. So there's always something unique in baseball, but I thought that was quite fantastic to sort of see with that. So he has his own wee Twitter page, Ripken the Bat Dog. So we'll see what his antics are. But in the football season, he retrieves the tee. So the kicker in football uses a tee to place the ball on and then punts it. So Ripken gets out on the pitch for one of the college teams, and he takes the tee back then as well. So only in baseball could we have something as fantastic as that. Plenty of dogs been on pitches in football, proper football, soccer games we've been to in our time, occasionally interfering with play, but actually having that as an official part of the game is pretty fantastic stuff. So I'd get our listeners to have a wee look out for Ripken and see what he is up to. So,
does he become your second favourite dog of all time behind Pickles?
the dog who found was it the World Cup in when
the bushes.
66.
Yeah. How do you sniff out a World Cup? And there's one for. There's something dodgy was going on there with Pickles in the World Cup.
Yeah, quite possibly. I don't know. It's just one of those weird situations. That,
so
I remember it happening, but I don't really know what the details were. Did somebody actually steal the World Cup, or you can't just have lost it? What happened? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess somebody. Well, if you stole it, are you going to steal it and then throw it in the bushes? Or either you steal it and then you come back a wee while later to pick it up from the bushes? A little bit bizarre.
Yeah. Well, they ended up with it in the end, didn't they?
Yeah. Can't think of dogs in any other is sliding a sport? The dogs.
Yeah.
Sliding must be going through the ice there as well. So I'm not sure, but sporting dogs, Pickles and Ripken. There must be more listeners.
Yeah, we'll do a special next week when we've researched it.
Yeah. So into more serious matters, we obviously Richard is unfortunately absent tonight, but his Mariners are on a 8-game winning streak. Certainly pushing for wildcard spots in the American League and looking good these days. But Dave Jr., White Sox, managed to recover and split a series with the good old Tigers just now, but they're still sort of spluttering away, trying to get there, the White Sox.
Yeah, there's quite an interesting stat I seen earlier today, actually. There's a really good guy on Twitter called Jay Cuda, and he's a White Sox fan, but he works for MLB stats department, which Alan would just, I think the three of us could actually go and spend a holiday there. But like Disneyland. But he put out a stat saying that for the last 38 days, so take it back a step. In baseball, for those of you that don't know, quite often as a form guide, your last 10 games are quite critical to give you an idea of a form guide. The same way that in Britain, you would see that against football teams, usually in some bookies' coupons. But for the last 38 days in a row, the White Sox have either been 6-4 or 5-5. And that's 6-4 being 6-4 being either way. So 4-6. Again, to those of you listening, that means 6 wins and 4 losses in your last 10 games, or 4 wins and 6 losses, or just kind of splitting them 5-5. And I think that gives a really good indication where the White Sox have been. A bit of a slow start and then consistently average.
Yeah.
We really had a poor start to the year with injuries, but since those guys have came back, they've not really hit the ground running, to be honest. There's been an argument that we've had a lot of tougher games against better sides, so sides that are perhaps over a 500 record. But and there's a lot of talk just now about entering a 19-game spell against teams from the American League Central, so our own league, and that would be games against Allen's Detroit, Cleveland, Minnesota, and Kansas City. So our division is regarded as probably one of the 2 weakest across MLB. So if there is a chance to kind of close that gap between the White Sox, who are sitting in third just now, and ironically, it would be far easier for us to win our division to get into the playoffs than it would be to finish as a wild card, which just sounds a little bit strange if you ask me. But we can only look to Richard's Mariners as inspiration. So I was just doing a little bit of maths there, and you guys mentioned that they're on an 8-game winning streak. Out the last 10, they've won 9 and lost 1. But they've won 8 in a row. So before those 8 games took place, compared to where they are now, that's 40 points in the old percentage, which is a hell of a swing. It's took them from basically 480 up to 520. And it just goes to show you, if you get a good run of games, a good confidence, it can absolutely turn the season round. And I think before we started recording tonight, Alan talked about Tigers fans get quite excited about a recent resurgence, which I'm sure he'll talk about later. But the White Sox, there's a little bit of hope there, where if you're coming up against, well, I say 19 games, 4 are out the way now. And the disappointing thing is that we've come out of those 4 games tying them 2 each with a team in Detroit that probably won't compete for the playoff spots. So if you're playing a team like Detroit at home, again, with respect, Al, you'd like to try and think that you can win that series 3-1. Perhaps more optimistically, stronger teams might be thinking 4-0. But to come out of that 2 each against a Detroit team, by the way, who played well. But I think if you're a team with aspirations of winning a division, you need to be doing better than what the White Sox are doing just now. And it's going up to a good time where they might look to try and prove those credentials by winning these games before the All-Star break, but also perhaps making some trades during July. When I think the transfer window is open now, but deals tend not to be done very early in the window. Teams are still looking to see where they are, if they've got aspirations of finishing the playoffs. And towards the end of July, they start to make those trades if it benefits their organisation going forward, to maybe offload a high wage earner or a star player and get 2 or 3 future stars to put through their system. So it'll be interesting to see where things go. But again, if the White Sox are going to make a run at the title, it has to be over the next 2 weeks. Is that fair to say, Alan, about your Detroit Tigers team? Are the playoffs too far out there for you, or?
Oh, absolutely. It's not even a question. So no, we're a million miles off. I just finish off that White Sox bit. There's a stat. I didn't even think anybody would be recording a stat like that, where they're saying that they've only varied between 6-4 and 4-6. So now working that out, they were obviously 6-4 heading into the series against the Tigers, then went to 4-6, and now they're presumably back at 6-4 again. So the guy's got to be good that he's picked up on something like that. A little bit sad, but no, fair play to the guy. I absolutely love it. I'm tempted to go back and say what the Tigers would be like, but it won't take too much to think about that. Tigers, young Riley Green. I think they'd hoped, drafted by the Tigers in 2019. Tigers had hoped to have him in their opening day roster this season, but he broke his right foot. So he came in just a couple of weeks ago, the middle of June, I think late June. She's had 2 or 3 weeks. He's done exceptionally well. A single in his first at bat for the Tigers. His first homer for the Tigers was a walk-off homer as well. So he's done well. Can a young guy like that really have helped give them the momentum that saw them win 6 games in a row and start to look a wee bit better? A team that's playing 36 wins against 49 losses so far this season. I don't know. You were talking to me earlier as well, Dave, about the Tigers bullpen, which seems reasonable. So I was fascinated to see the closer, Gregory Soto. The Tigers have won 36 games and he has had 17 saves, which seems quite hard to believe that he has made a save. When you consider the parameters for a save, he's made a save in pretty much every second Tigers wins. So what does a guy like that do? He'll be well remunerated at the Tigers. Will there be teams out there looking for a good closer that can save games for them and do what needs to be done, that might be competing for titles? I don't know the contractual position of the guy, but I think it seems that in baseball anything goes if you have the money. So let's see what happens. But what about up in Boston, Dave? The Red Sox. What's your current thoughts there?
Yeah, well, actually, I think Boston might be interested in a specialist closer like your man Soto, or I've heard it mentioned. I think the Cubs have got pretty good closers. Is it Robertson? And they're talking about him because, in the trade deadline, the Chicago Cubs are not doing too well. So they're likely to be in selling mode. As Dave says, it's a little bit opposite to football because there's no jeopardy in baseball, is there? There's no relegation. So if you're a team that's out of contention, what they tend to do is, they might sell off some of their older veteran, what they call veteran players, better players, and start building for the future. And then you get a team that's in contention, like Yankees or Boston or one of the others, who will say, right, well, what do we need to win a championship here? Do we need a starting pitcher, a closer, or an extra bat? So so that's whereas in football you get big trades and the new managers coming in if you're struggling down the bottom because you might get relegated. That's not the case in baseball. But Boston, I sort of made a note at the halfway point. What is it, sort of 81 games in, and Boston found themselves in second place in the very strong AL East. 9 games above 500. That's 45 wins, 36 losses, and in a wild card spot, and a game and a half to the good of that. So in quite a good position, especially when you consider they had a very poor start, very poor April. And what Dave says about playing against your rivals in your division is very apt, and that could be the key to the White Sox. If they've got a lot of games coming up against their rivals, whereas Boston have not done too well. That's putting it mildly. Actually, I think they just split the series, 4-game series against the Yankees, and that's the only series they haven't lost against teams in their division, including the Orioles, who are only 1 game off 500 themselves. So you could have a whole division, the AL East, where every team's got a winning record. And, well, until recently, I think that Tampa Bay, it's quite complicated, isn't it? Tampa Bay have lost the last 3, Toronto have lost the last 4. But at one stage, you had, so the AL will have 6 teams in the postseason. They'll have each of the 3 division winners go forward, and then there's 3 wildcard places this year. And at at one point, the 3 wildcard spots were Boston, Tampa, and Toronto, all from the AL East. So it's pretty tough. And, the next games, Boston are playing 4 in Tampa. Although I think they've got Chris Sale coming back. There's a lot of injury problems, especially with the starting rotation, and Chris Sale hasn't pitched at all this year. I think he's scheduled to pitch tomorrow night. So that could be important. And then, of course, they're on the road to play another 3 games against the Yankees in the Bronx. So, we'll know a bit more at the All-Star break. It's always a good point. Halfway report is important, but the All-Star break is when all the pundits look at what needs to happen, and more importantly, the general managers look at what needs to happen. And I think what's happened at Boston this year, they brought through a lot of good young prospects, and the general manager, Chaim Bloom, who used to do that job at Tampa Bay, done a very good job in improving the farm system at Boston. But Boston being Boston, they expect, it's good to look at the long term, but Boston fans, especially, this century, since they've won a few championships, they expect to be competitive and competing for a championship. So they want him to be active at the trade deadline. So maybe a starting pitcher, maybe a closer, and maybe 1 extra bat, first base, something like that. So I'm pretty happy with the way things are going. The last 2 wins made a big difference. If the Yankees had swept as 4 games to nothing, you could be looking at a very different Yorkshire Dave right now. But I'm feeling quite chipper.
Good. Young Dave, you had some thoughts on that?
I was just going to say, Dave mentioned the 3 teams at one point occupied the 3 wildcard places. I just did a quick check. They still do. The only addition to that is Richard Seattle, who have gate crashed the party, and technically they're on the same percentage as Toronto. Both are 45 for 42. So there's 4 teams occupying the 3 places just now. And interestingly, Baltimore are the next team on the list. So it just shows what a strong division that particular one is. And not try to sook in with Dave or that, but he's talking about getting swept by the Yankees. The Yankees are just phenomenal this year. As horrible as it is to say, they just feel. And again, I don't have a long baseball history, but what they're doing this year, they must be a nightmare to come up against. They just win. And it's again
from the last 2 nights.
Yeah, very true. So I don't think it's any disgrace in getting beat off the Yankees just now. And I'd be quite interested to see their odds of winning it all, to be honest. They must be pretty clear favourites just now.
Yeah, I think at one stage I did hear that they were on pace for equaling Seattle Mariners' record of 116 wins, but that would, be quite an amazing feat. But they I didn't watch a lot of the games live because they weren't UK friendly times, but they look extremely strong. You look at their run differential is plus 177, 450 runs scored. I don't think anyone's got more than that in both leagues. 273 against. And there's another thing, if you look at the standings table, I think we talked about this in the last episode, didn't we? Run differential. And you'll see there's a column expected wins and losses. So that's where I would, although you play, Dave, your team is playing against guys in, your own division. So the next few games are really important. I'd be still a bit concerned in as much as 2 games under 500. The run differential is minus 37, and this expected win-loss is 38.46. So that leads me to believe that maybe one of two things, that you're not really going to pick up much more. Your results are probably slightly better than they should be. But what you said was maybe that you've been playing a higher standard of team than some of the other players. So some of the other teams. So we'll all come out in the wash, won't it, in the 162.
Yeah.
Profound.
Fairly sure complimenting the Yankees wasn't sooking up to Yorkshire Dave, young man. So the Tigers have played the Yankees and were swept with a combined run score of 21-5, including that 5-4 defeat. So yeah, good team. So you touched on as well the All-Star break, Dave, young Dave. What's the news in the All-Star game, and who are we going to see from our teams and such like?
Yeah, so again, for those of you who are long-term listeners, or if you're just sort of listening to this, we covered off the All-Star game last year quite thoroughly in terms of what it means. And it's quite an exciting few days for baseball fans. Really getting to see their players represented. I think the closest I could come to explaining that would be almost your club team in football having players representing their country. I think, and there's that little bit of pride that your players have been selected. Just before I move on to that, actually, the Yankees are the favourites to lift the World Series at 15-4. And then it's, again, out of us, you're looking at the Red Sox at 25-1, the White Sox at 35-1. Unbelievably, the Mariners are 66-1, quite some way outside the White Sox, which maybe tells people how they feel about them. And the Tigers are not
quoted.
No, they're 1,000 to 1.
Leicester City did it.
Yes, they didn't win the World Series, Al.
No, right, that's right, yeah, true.
But in terms of the All-Star game, it's great. It's really enjoyable, and it's a big honour for these players to be selected. So to give you a quick idea, we have, from what I can see, 6 players who have been selected from Boston. We've got Rafi and Bogey. Rafael Devers, it's his second selection. Xander Bogaerts, it's his fourth. The White Sox have contributed with Tim Anderson, making this will be his second appearance as well. The only rookie involved in the whole game comes from Seattle. I'm leaving the Tigers to last, Alan, on purpose. The only rookie to make the whole game is a lad by the name of Rodriguez. So that'll be quite interesting if Richard knows a little bit about him. He seems to be an outfielder, but I don't have any of his details to hand. But it must be quite exciting for the young man to make it. And a man that Alan and Dave have mentioned tonight, Soto, the closer for the Tigers. This is his second appearance. Quite a cool looking character as well.
Yeah.
He's quite a technique about him. But the one that really interested me, and again, it says a lot about baseball. We've spoke a lot about the sentimentality of the game. But Miguel Cabrera has been selected as a commissioner's choice, I think, alongside Albert Pujols. And this will be Miggy's, it's up there with his home run tally almost. This will be his 12th appearance in an All-Star game if he takes to the field. And from what I can gather, I don't know if you know a bit more about it than I, Al, but this seems to be not a pity appearance. It's completely not that, but it's not based on fan selection or anything. It just seems to be almost a bit of a well done. It's a congratulations on all of his achievements in the game, from his 3,000 hits to his home runs. And again, baseball does this type of thing so well. It might not be Miggy's last season from what we're hearing, but it'll certainly be Pujols' last year. But the fact that the governing bodies still find that space and find that warmth to reward and recognise real characters and real legends of the game, it must be heartening for Tigers fans, Al.
Yeah, when he was selected, I did read up a wee bit more about it because I was intrigued I thought I understood the process, but I was intrigued to sort of think about where does somebody like that fit into what is effectively a sort of superstar game. And interestingly, I think at one stage, Miggy at 308 is like batting almost in the top 10 of the American League. So he is batting well. He obviously got through his 3,000 hits this season as well, and actually continues to hit fairly well. But it was interesting, the comments from Tigers fans, and maybe fans of other teams can creep in there. Who knows? Social media might actually be corrupted by people who just want to be obnoxious and maybe look for a fight or an argument. But some people were critical of it, and some people were thinking this is exactly what should be done. The commissioner, whether you like the guy or not, he's always not the most popular person. It's an all-star game. It's a celebrity game. It's a big thing for the fans. The superstars should be there. Why is Miggy batting so well just now? So again, just learning about the game as you do all the time. Hitting a lot of his RBI stats are very good this year. Hitting a lot of singles. I think he was 308, but he was something like 360 for the runners in scoring position. So you've also got a guy who no longer can maybe hit the big homers, can no longer be hitting out the ground. He's obviously not fast. Miggy's never really been fast to be hitting doubles and trebles, triples. But he's obviously finding the holes, he's finding the pockets, and he's managing to push his men along on base then as well. So there's something quite fantastic about a guy with that sort of ability then to do that. He's doing it at 39 years old. My only question, my only doubt about it, and it comes back to, and we've seen it in football with these type of things as well, is what happens next season? Is it the Alan McGregor in goal for Rangers at 39? You're suddenly playing in a European final. You're coming on for the last 2 minutes of a Scottish Cup final when the trophy's wrapped up. Does Miggy come back next year, have another great year? If he does, I think from what I'm saying there, he's unlikely to be batting figures and doing stuff that would merit an actual selection into the All-Star game. So the commissioner's got to make a choice. Do I put him in now, or do I take a gamble and think, oh, I'll wait for next year? And sounds to me that he's done the right thing. He's taken Miggy in at the right time. Guy's a legend in Detroit. He's going to Cooperstown. It's his 12th appearance. What will that mean to him? I'd imagine he's the sort of guy that's always honoured and delighted to be getting those selections. So it's a yes from me. Not surprisingly.
How about yourself, Dave? How do you feel about the Red Sox additions to this year? And are there any that missed out that you feel is not warranted?
Yeah, I think the right to in there, Devers, is amazing. He's becoming a phenomenon. He really is. And he's been out the last couple of games, actually, with a little bit of I think it's a back injury he's had. So hopefully we'll be back. I did check tonight. I don't think he's officially on the IL. So I think it's maybe day to day. So hopefully he's going to be back soon. And I think in the close season, the off season, that he was working on his defense. He's a third baseman, and I don't know, he's still quite young, but he's been around for a long time. And this season, his defense has been outstanding as well as he's hitting. But he's hitting for power now, and he's got something going on with Gerrit Cole at the Yankees. He in one of the losses, I think it was said in the warm up that they've got stats on 1-to-1 stats, and Gerrit Cole's one of the best pitchers in the business, but for some reason, Rafi seems to hit home runs off him, and he hit 2 in the same game. I think it was in one of the losses, but he's a phenomenon. And Bogey, Xander Bogaerts, he is the shortstop. He's the one that's really, I think he's the captain in the clubhouse, very important player. Now his contract is up this season. He could go to free agency. And it's not certain that they seem to be coming up with the right deal for him. And this would, plus Devers, I think, he's only got one more year. The only other guy who could have been going really was JD Martinez, the designated hitter. He's just missed out. The catcher, Vasquez, actually was a very late run for him because he's in astonishing form. And, he's hitting well, hitting home runs, and he's pretty fast around the base as well. It can, for a catcher who they have a busy time of it, don't they? Anyway, but to be contributing so he's those are the other two that could maybe have made it. Trevor Story potentially, but yeah, I think they picked the right two from the Red Sox, and excuse me, it'd be good to see them there.
Cool. Yeah. So when's the game? Where's the game this year?
Obviously, we know that type of information, Alan. If you just wait for about 30 seconds, quite clearly, it's the 92nd Midsummer Classic, which takes place 1 week tomorrow at Dodger Stadium. Yes, so foreign territory, given that that's the National League and our guys are all American leagues. So no, it'll be interesting. I'll definitely be watching. I don't know. There seemed to be some form of home run derby in London this weekend. Did any of you pay attention, or I must admit it kind of went past me? But that's usually
it's not. It's something different because I think the home run derby is the day before the All-Star game, and I presume it'll be at Dodger Stadium as well. The London thing was slightly different, and I didn't really look into it in any great detail, except there was a guy in it who was an ex-player, the Red Sox, Johnny Gomes, who did something pretty amazing. I mentioned it in one of the previous things. He actually is a bit of a Red Sox fan. Occasionally, he does work for the Red Sox, I think, and he does some work, some punditry work. But in a game at Fenway, he was sat in the Green Monster seats, and he actually caught a home run ball. So I'm pretty sure he was in this home run thing, but it's separate to the home run derby day, but I don't have any more detail than that.
Cool. Thank you for that. So as well as the All-Star game coming out this week in Scotland, we obviously switching sports, but sticking with a bat and a ball, if I can call it that, is obviously the home of golf. We had the Scottish Open last week, and this week we have the Open up at St Andrews. I was taking a particular interest in the closing day at the Scottish Open. The top three guys who finish in the top 10 that aren't already qualified get to play in the Open. And there was an American professional by the name of Alex Smalley who needed a par on the last to qualify for the Open. And unfortunately, Alex bogeyed the hole. I say that as of relevance in this podcast because his bag has the logo of the Burlington Sox Sock Puppets, a baseball team out of Burlington, North Carolina, who play in the Appalachian Leagues. So as a young guy making his way on the PGA Tour, I wouldn't imagine there's a big financial sponsorship in there, but it's quite cool to see that. So I have seen video of him with possibly one of the coolest head covers you could have for your driver, if you could imagine what Burlington Sock Puppets head cover could look like for your driver. So sadly, we won't be seeing Alec up in the Open at St Andrews, but we might follow his career over the next wee while and maybe do something good for the the minor league baseball family there as well. So it's all go. So, guys, it's been a good chat tonight. Anything else? Are we happy to move on, get the TV on, put your feet up and watch the games that are on MLB TV tonight?
Yeah, that does it for me, Al. It's a pretty good roundup halfway through the season, aren't we? And it's along with last season, this is the closest I've really watched a full season of it. Every day, not watching 3 or 4 hours of it, but the condensed game on MLB TV is, pretty much the first thing to do in the morning, without knowing the scoreline. Sometimes I'll watch, if I'm up late, I might watch the first inning or two live and then catch the condensed game until 8 or 9 minutes.
Cup of Yorkshire tea in the morning and watch the condensed version. It's a great facility, MLB TV.
It is. It really is. It's worth every cent.
So it's a good night or good afternoon or good morning even, whatever time you're listening to us. And thanks for tuning in once again to the Highland Bullpen. We look forward to catching up with you next time, and give us a shout. Anything you want to chat about or ask us about, guys. See you soon.